In today's show, the Blazers do very little at the trade deadline. This is who they are. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen. Coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, so make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show is a trade deadline recap. What happened? What didn't happen, and kind of how we got here. We'll look around the league, talk about what the Blazers did. One thing, they had Delano Banton and they signed Ashton Higgins to a 10-day contract. Two things, but one of them at the trade deadline. And we'll look around the rest of the league and kind of the implications and the things the Blazers didn't do because of that. And then the Blazers played a basketball game this evening against the Detroit Pistons. It did not go well. In a variety of ways. We'll save the recap for the end of the show because the basketball game against the Detroit Pistons, where some of the Blazers lost to some of the Pistons, is not the biggest news of the day. The biggest news of the day is that, hey, your Portland Trailblazers joined a bunch of teams with not doing very much. The trade deadline just didn't have very many fireworks, and as speculated by pretty much everyone in Blazerland, the Blazers didn't do anything. Malcolm Brogdon still on the team. Jeremy Grant still on the team. I don't know, Avery Simons, I guess if you were really hoping for something big, still on the team. If you wanted Matisse Thybulle out of there, still on the team, whatever it was. They didn't make a move. They made one minor move. They traded a top 55 protected pick in 2027 to the Boston Celtics in exchange for Delano Banton. We'll talk about Banton in the second segment, but I think in general, let's kind of run down what happened in the league a little bit, and then we can get into why the Blazers didn't do anything. Because I think that's the question you might be asking is like, or you might be celebrating. I think there is people who are really excited about the pragmatic approach the Blazers are taking. So let's get into why this was perhaps the pragmatic approach. It's not a lot of stuff happened. This was a quiet deadline. This was a deadline for people who love obscure basketball players. Ochai Agbaji and Kelly Olynyk. Oh my goodness, what a trade! But it's like teams sat out. The Atlanta Hawks didn't trade DeJounte Murray. The Lakers didn't make a deal. The Warriors didn't make a deal. The Bulls, puzzlingly enough, didn't make a deal. Like there were plenty of teams who basically didn't do anything. The Houston Rockets, they made a deal. They traded an injured player for an injured player. They didn't do anything. The teams that did stuff, the Knicks, they traded to get Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks from the Pistons, who the Blazers played tonight. The Mavs, they made big splashes. Got Daniel Gafford and P.J. Washington. Daniel Gafford, the center from the Wizards. P.J. Washington, the forward, plays a little small ball center from the Wizards, from the Hornets. OKC acquired Gordon Hayward from Charlotte. I think Charlotte had a pretty nice day unloading veterans, kind of ushering themselves into a new era. And then they've also traded Terry Rozier, the kind of finally picking a path. And the path isn't try to win 38 games or whatever it is. And the funniest trade of the day by far was the Milwaukee Bucks trading for Patrick Beverley. I think there's been criticism from Blazer fans, and perhaps rightly so, that the Milwaukee Bucks don't use Damian Lillard the right way. And they certainly don't use the Damian Lillard in the way that he was used to being utilized here in Portland. But the Blazers would have never signed up to have longtime hated rival Patrick Beverley join you. Pat Bev's going to help, I think, but extremely funny. Like, Dame doesn't really have beef in the league. He has long-standing, probably closing in on a decade of beef with Pat Bev, going back to the 2014 playoffs with Houston. Long-standing beef. And now they're teammates. Definitely the funniest minor deal of the day. But there wasn't big fireworks. Nothing happened. In fact, by my count, 3 but 3.5 first round picks traded hands. 3.5 first round picks. That's it. The whole dang time. I mean, you can go back to the Heat trade with Terry Rozier, and there's a first round pick traded, but like on deadline day, like today, the Hornets got a first round pick from the Mavs for PJ Washington. The Wizards got a first round pick from the Mavs from OKC, but via the Mavs for Daniel Gafford, and the Mavs had to agree to swap a 28 first rounder with OKC. So they like moved some picks around to send picks out. And the Jazz got a first rounder for when they sent Ochai Agbaji and Kelly Olynyk to the Toronto Raptors. And really the Raptors just probably wanted to get out from under. They're going to have as many as 3 first round picks in 2024. It's probably just too many to add. So they said, Ochai Agbaji is probably better than the 24th pick in the NBA draft. Let's just, if we can get him, we'll call it a swap. We'll call it a fair swap. And Kelly Olynyk is pretty good basketball player too, although maybe not around for a long time. But that gives you a sense of what was out there. It gives you a sense of when the Blazers were trying to, and now who knows if they were trying to. I imagine my perception of what the Blazers were doing were receiving calls, not making calls. But when the Blazers were fielding calls, there just weren't first round picks to be had. I mean, the team that moved first rounders is the Dallas Mavericks. Pretty much nobody else did. Like I said, like the Raptors kind of just like got out from under a first round pick because they were going to have too many in this upcoming draft. So there was like they kind of flipped it out. But like Dallas moved picks. Dallas was a team that held on to their young players and you moved first round picks in order to upgrade. And I think the Mavs got better. I think the Mavs are more likely to lose in the first round of the playoffs than they are to make the Western Conference Finals, even after these moves, but undeniably a better basketball team this evening than they were this morning. But they're the only team, because they're relatively desperate to get better, who move first round picks. One team in the league facing a generational talent. They have the thing that everyone wants who's chasing a championship. It's the market inefficiency, is have a player who's one of the 5 best players in the world. Luka Doncic is great. So the Mavs are like, they have some urgency to go ahead and get good. And so what they do, they traded first round picks to go ahead and get good. No one else in the league did that, which kind of speaks to where the Blazers landed. Yikes. If they were hoping to get a first round pick for Malcolm Brogdon, it just straight up was not out there. I don't know that, I'm not like reporting that or anything, but like just look at the deals. It was going to be a second rounder. I think Charlotte might have pounced early on the Terry Rozier thing and made it happen. And made it happen with the Heat. Maybe the Blazers shouldn't have burned bridges with Miami so aggressively over the summer, and then they could have already done that. But they don't necessarily want to do that, right? But I think the landscape of the league, and I think this is important to kind of understand as we're talking about this, or as you're talking about this, or as you're listening about this. I think that's what you're doing right now. You're listening about this. It's like, one of the reasons the Blazers probably didn't do anything is because there wasn't much to do. According to Joe Cronin, when he spoke to reporters, he said that there was a bunch of calls and a bunch of interest in specifically Malcolm Brogdon, but he just didn't find a deal to his suiting or to his liking, that it suited him. And you look across the board at all the action that happened today, and all this and the lack of movement of big players, the lack of, Bruce Brown didn't go anywhere, who's long rumored to be, the Raptors want a first round pick for him. DeJounte Murray doesn't go anywhere. Kyle Kuzma doesn't go anywhere. It's, when Bojan Bogdanovic gets traded after basically multiple years of assuming that he absolutely would, the Knicks traded 2 second round picks. Then Quentin Grimes in order to get Bogdanovic and Burks from Detroit. There weren't first out there. It doesn't appear. It just doesn't appear. So I think you can think 2 things, and I think this is totally fair. I think you can be frustrated that the Blazers didn't do anything. That's a totally fair reaction, and also understand why they might not have. Let's talk about what Cronin said. Joe Cronin spoke to reporters, though, and I think this kind of speaks to where they're at. He spoke to kind of where they're at as a team and the sort of what the thinking is now. And I want to talk a little bit about that and kind of what it means for the future, because the Blazers kind of sat out this trade deadline. They can't sit out many more of these. They have to continue to get better. And today they chose not to for probably pragmatic reasons. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about Joe Cronin and more in the second segment. First, I want to tell you about our good friends over at eBay Motors. They've teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd, my man Joshy, to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. So whether you're prepping for daily fantasy sports or you are scouring the waiver wire as we head down the stretch of a season-long fantasy team, right here every week, I'm going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us for this week in the eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Pick of the Week. He's got Marvin Bagley III. And as mentioned, Daniel Gafford no longer plays for the Washington Wizards. He got traded to the Dallas Mavericks. And the Wizards didn't get back. They got back Rashawn Holmes, but they didn't get back someone who's going to hop into that starting lineup. That's Marvin Bagley's to lose. He's the likely starting center, and he could be, in Josh's eyes, really worth grabbing if he is still available in your fantasy league. As I always do before I read Josh's recommendations, I check if these players are available in my league. Marvin Bagley not available in mine, unfortunately, but if he's available in yours, go track him down. Go track him down because big minutes and has a chance to be productive on a team that plays incredibly fast, a lot of possessions, a lot of stats to be had. Go find Marvin Bagley if you can. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball. He's going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship is about each player being a perfect fit. A perfect fit. It's the same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts to choose from for your ride or die, you can always make sure your ride stays running smoothly, whether you need brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, these prices, you're burning rubber, baby, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right. So, usually after these days, Joe Cronin comes and talks to the media. GMs don't really have to talk to the media. If you're Leon Rose and you run the Knicks, you never talk to the media under any circumstances. Truly, never has. But like Cronin on deadline day and early in free agency, he'll have one of his public press conferences. He's, in terms of GMs, a very accessible one. But this is when he sort of makes his public statements and public appearances. And these function effectively as sort of State of the Unions. This one was not particularly noteworthy. He talked about just, he likes where the team is. And he didn't, he didn't go as far to say as like, well, we aren't going to trade, he didn't say we're desperate to be the 23 and 29 Houston Rockets. And if we can only be like squarely the 11th best team in the West next year, I'll be deeply, deeply satisfied. I don't think he really thinks that. Like I was teasing him earlier this week and getting heated about it because I do think like a racing to the middle during a rebuild is a mistake. And that's kind of, by not making a trade, it does feel like a race to the middle. But if there is no deal out there for Malcolm Brogdon, and I don't think the Blazers were really interested in any meaningful way to trade Jeremy Grant, and they probably should have been, because if you miss opportunities to get good, they're gone. They don't come back. But if the market's not there, and the market's pretty obviously was not there at this trade deadline, it is the pragmatic approach to not make these deals, right? Totally. Like I said, I think you can be frustrated that they didn't make any deals while understanding why they didn't. Like I think those things can happen at the same time. Like, dang, I wish they had done something, and dang, they didn't do anything because nothing was out there. And if you're really excited that they didn't make a deal, great, congratulations, you had a freaking great day. I am happy for you. It happened. I'm legitimately happy for you. It happened just the way you hoped. But Cronin, I'm not going to quote him verbatim here. It's on the Blazers YouTube channel if you really want to go watch it. It's about 15 minutes of him chatting pregame. But he mentioned that he didn't want the team to take a step back. That he doesn't want to take any more steps back. He wants to continue moving forward. And that's why I joke about the Houston Rockets thing. He wants them to continue to move forward. And I think there is something perhaps noble about that, right? Is that he thinks like we have a whole bunch of young players in the roster. We have all these rookies and second-year guys. We have Scoot Henderson. We have Shaedon Sharpe. We have, every time is one of our longest tenured players, and he's under 25. DeAndre Ayton's 25 years old. Like this team's young. They don't. It's like Jeremy Grant is good and 30 years old, but he's not like ancient by any means, right? But there isn't this urgency to like dump veterans and go young. They're young. They don't need to necessarily do that. He doesn't want to take a step back. But then he also said, I don't want to rush it, which is kind of, in a way, saying nothing, right? Like he doesn't want to tank. He doesn't want to and they might tank. Like they might just straight up lose intentionally the last handful of games this season. I don't think they'll do it for like 10, but I wouldn't be surprised if the final 3 are a lot of remixers. They also might just naturally lose. They lost to the Pistons tonight. They might just naturally lose some games. They're really injured. But like they, if you don't want to take a step back, but you don't want to rush it forward, does it just mean you want to stay the course? I don't think he means that. And I think I've learned enough from watching Joe Cronin do these things that taking him at his actual word is a mistake. You recall this time last year they said he was anxious to push all the chips in to get a player and willing to overpay when they overpaid, so anxious to overpay in order to build around Dame, and he had literally no intention of doing that. Very clearly no intention of doing that. So like I'm really not going to take many of his, like I'm not going to put a lot of credence into his words, right? Like he's getting up there and talking to the media and saying what he has to say to get to the next thing. I think his actions will be much more valuable for us to interpret than what he says in 15 minutes in front of the media once a year. Although I will remember the lies and complain about them in my space that I get to complain about them. But here's kind of where I've landed with this. I think it's totally fine that they didn't trade Malcolm Brogdon today. I think it's totally fine they didn't trade Jeremy Grant today. But I do think if they start next season, particularly with Malcolm Brogdon on the roster, along with these 3 young guards, Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, and Scoot Henderson, it would be a pretty bad mistake. And let me offer you this, because I see this sort of dichotomy too often. The Blazers are allowed to trade Malcolm Brogdon for another adult. When I say that I think the Blazers should trade Malcolm Brogdon, it's to get rid of the logjam, right? They have too many guards that are best with the ball in their hands, and Malcolm Brogdon's one of them. He's good. And if you can trade him for an upgrade for a player that fits better next to the 3 guards that you already have, and Shaedon Sharpe, again, is like someone who seems to thrive, even though he has some off-ball skills, seems to thrive better when you give him the ball and say, go. He seems to lose some of his aggression when you stick him in the corner. He doesn't always rev up the same way. So, like, I think eventually this summer I'm sure they will, and they really need to revisit it and get value from Malcolm Brogdon as this in the off season. And if they do so, I don't mean they need to go young and they need to, shed money and be cheap and get draft picks. What they should, if they really do want to prioritize being somewhat competitive and having functional development by having their young players on the court, but in like an environment where they're not getting shredded all the time, you're allowed to trade Malcolm Brogdon for another adult. You're allowed to trade him for another veteran that fits the roster a little bit more. You're allowed to trade him for a wing or a backup center or like someone who can provide mentorship and teach players how to be professionals in the league, but also like not get in the way of guys playing. You can do both, and that's the challenge. I don't think it was there for them this trade deadline, but this idea that trading Malcolm Brogdon means draft picks only is so silly to me. It's so silly to me. You can make trades in a variety of ways, and the Blazers will this offseason. They are challenged with finding a real trade for Brogdon because they just clearly need to do it. And entertain it for Jeremy Grant too. He's not as much because there's not like they need his help at the forward spots more, right? But entertain it because it's very unlikely that the next time the Blazers are good, either of those 2 dudes are on the roster. So go ahead and start the process. Don't rush. Don't take a step back, but don't rush. Continue to move forward. By doing nothing here, I think it speaks more to the market, but doing nothing again this summer would be very worrisome, and I don't think they will. But I think that's kind of where I landed on this. Where I landed on this trade deadline is they've narrowed their window to like really needing to get draft, free agency, trades right all this summer. It's big summer for them. And after sitting out this trade deadline, they got to figure it out real quick. Who is Delano Banton? Excuse me. The Blazers sent a top 55 protected pick in 2027, second round pick, to the Boston Celtics to get Banton. It's never gonna that pick will never be traded. It's a fake pick. Basically, the Blazers have a 2027 pick that they owe the lesser of. They get the lesser of, the worst of, and the better version of it goes as a swap with the New Orleans Pelicans. So in order for it to go to the Celtics, both the Pelicans and the Blazers in 2027 would have to finish with 2 of the 5 best records in the league. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So the pick's fake. They're just they're going to take a flyer on Banton. If you were to kind of like describe my favorite type of player, he's exactly it. 6'8", 6'9", skinny point guard who absolutely cannot shoot. He was the 46th pick in the 2021 NBA draft. Spent the first 2 years with Toronto. Spent this last half season with the Celtics before coming over. Career 3.4 points, 1.7 boards, and 1.3 assists. Shoots 41% from the floor for his career, 25% from 3, and 67% from the free throw line. He's like a big dude who has some ball handling and playmaking skills, but he's like not a pure point guard, but he's like more of a guard because he's skinny than he is other positions, but he's tall. And I love weird players, and I love big point guards who can't shoot. Banton is like the perfect player for me to root for. I don't think he's good, to be clear, but I do enjoy him. I watched a bunch of him his second year with the Raptors. I have not seen him play a single minute in a Celtics uniform, but I watched him a bunch of him his second year with the Raptors, and I was like intrigued by him. But he just, if he pans out, great, an interesting flyer on a 24-year-old. If he doesn't pan out, no biggie. It's a second-round pick that as soon as you hit the 2027 NBA draft, it will be yours magically again. Okay, the Blazers played a basketball game today, believe it or not. Let's talk about it. They lost to the Detroit Pistons in overtime. It was a weird one on a weird night in a weird time for the league when basically everyone plays despite a bunch of teams not having enough players to be competitive. And the Blazers, for their own part, were also injured. Let's talk all about that. But first, let me tell you about Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level, like the 2024 Nissan Rogue. It's perfect for city drives and great escapes. It's got class exclusive Google built in to your always updating assistant, so you can call on it for almost everything. That's Google Assistant, Google Maps, Google Play, all built right into a 12.3-inch HD touchscreen. It's got the infotainment system, so you don't got to plug in your phone anymore. You don't have to connect your phone via Bluetooth. It's just right there waiting for you when you get in the car. And the 2024 Nissan Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. But maybe you got a bigger gang. Maybe you got a bigger crew and you want to be cruising around in true luxury. Well, how about checking out the 2024 Nissan Armada? Why don't you just change your expectations for a full-size SUV? Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Tow bigger, explore further in the 2024 Nissan Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Blazers played a basketball game today. Believe it or not, they played a basketball game today. We're going to do our fastest recap in the West and talk about what we saw in a game that went to OT. Let's do what we do, baby. Blazers lose 128-122 to the Pistons. Malcolm Brogdon and DeAndre Ayton missed this game due to illness, general illness in the box score, which is a classic tank commander, general illness. They're not tanking. This is just a classic joke. General illness sidelines them. They were conquered by the general. Scoot Henderson did not play in this game. Left foot sprain. Duop Reith was a late scratch with right knee tendonitis. So the Blazers rolled out a starting lineup of Anthony Simons, Matisse Thybulle, Toumani Camara, Jeremy Grant, and Jabari Walker at center. Luckily, they were playing against the Detroit Pistons, who just didn't have that many available players. They only had 9 dudes healthy. They called up another guy, so they technically had 10, but like nine guys, plus, including two-ways, available in this game. They waived Killian Hayes today. They waived Danilo Gallinari. They traded Bogdanovic. They traded Bojan Bogdanovic. They traded Alec Burks. Like they're just light on guys because it's deadline day and with the deals pending and stuff, like guys aren't available yet. So they were super, super light-handed too, or short-handed rather. So Yikes. Shorthanded on shorthanded. Some of the Blazers for some of the Pistons. And Portland led early 30-25. They had a monster second quarter, 41 points in the second quarter, shot 63% from the floor, led 71-56 at the break, and they were cruising. They led by as many 20 in the second quarter and led by 23 with 4 minutes and 59 seconds remaining in the third quarter. Anthony Simons hits a technical free throw. Cash. He checks out. Ashton Hagans, newly signed Blazer, checks in. Blazers are up 23, 5 minutes left in the third quarter. It's time to just roll on home against the worst team in the NBA, except they blow it. Anthony Simons didn't come back in the game. He had a sprained ankle and he was listed as questionable. Questionable just so rarely means you come back in these games. Like if you get a designation that isn't just like he's coming back, then it's just unlikely. And so as soon as they said on the broadcast, Anthony Simons is questionable to return. It's like, whoa. But at that point, the Pistons have cut a 23-point lead to 12, and the Blazers are just holding on for dear life because they just don't have their skill, right? Like they miss Malcolm Brogdon because he's good. They miss Scoot Henderson because he's just like, he can dribble, and they're desperate for someone who can like dribble towards the rim and get their own shot. They miss Duop Reath because he can shoot. They were missing DeAndre Ayton because he's been really good recently. Like, there's 4 players who play a ton, not to mention the guys that are out for the remainder of the season. So the Blazers, they're closed the third quarter only up 13, 97-84. That 23-point lead whittles down to 13 in the final 5 minutes of the third, and then it just gets away from them. They do not ever give up the lead, but in the final 70 seconds, up by 4, they give up a jumper to Cade Cunningham, then they give up off a rebound, a fast break bucket to Asar Thompson. And Jeremy Grant gets the ball back with a shot clock off, a chance to hold for the last shot. The Blazers call a timeout, and they're just going to set up like a go-get-it type of play for Jeremy Grant. These are good, right? Like I've mentioned this in the past. At the end of games, you want it to be simple. With a lot of time left, it gets a little harder if your guy doesn't have a really strong handle, and Jeremy Grant certainly does not have a strong handle. But like in general, in a tie game, I'm in favor of 1-4 flat. I'm in favor of flat being like guys on the flat against the baseline and just like one-on-one go take a jumper and you'll just live or die with it. Like the number one thing you want to do is get the very last shot of the game. Make sure the other team does not get another chance. And if like you have someone who can go get their own shot, like, sure. The problem is that the Blazers had just been riding Jeremy Grant. Like, okay, you're going to save us, dog. And he had been really good. But once Anthony Simons checked out, like, it was just so clear that it was like the plan was give the ball to Jeremy and hope he does it. Like there wasn't they were just ISOing him and they were just giving the ball and just letting him go to work, and he was going to work. Like he scored a cajillion points, finished with 49, a career high. But like the Pistons knew it. Everybody knew it. Everybody in the gym knew it. And so he gets the ball and kind of gets off it for a second, and then he gets it. He throws it. He's kind of a little too close to the sideline, and he gives the ball to Matisse Thybulle. Matisse Thybulle says, oh, okay, you picked up your dribble. And Matisse tries to do something where he just catches it and throws it right back to Jeremy and then tries to vacate because he wants to get 1-4 flat. He wants to get as far away as possible so the help can't come. But everybody knows that. And so Marcus Sasser says, well, I don't give a... Like, he's not going to pass. I'm not worried about Matisse Thybulle. I'm not worried about Jabari Walker. I'm not worried about Tumani Kamara. I'm not worried about Ashton Hagans. Good freaking luck. And he just hard double team on Jeremy Grant, rips it out of his hand. Just an absolute nightmare final play. I don't know. Let me talk about that in a moment. Marcus Sasser, who was really good in this game, flies the other way after getting a steal and misses what a would-be game-winning layup at the buzzer. It was almost going to be an awesome play to end the game, but he smoked the layup, went full Courtney Lee. With all due respect to my 2009 NBA playoff fanatics, just shout out to y'all. No due respect. Tied at 120 after regulation. You go to OT. Jeremy Grant hits a jumper, just like a 20-footer to start overtime, and the Blazers take a 2-point lead, but Marcus Sasser hits a 3 with 3 minutes left, and the Pistons would not trail for the remainder of the game. Jeremy Grant hits that first shot. The Blazers go 0 of 8 with 2 turnovers, so then to end overtime. It absolutely got away from them. Pistons win 128-122. That's your fastest recap in the West. Jeremy Grant, career high, 49 points to go with 8 boards and 6 assists. He was 18 of 20 at the free throw line. Dude was attacking and getting fouled and they just leaned on him. Anfernee Simons in 3 quarters, 29 and 5 assists. If he plays, they win. It's not a question. If he plays, they win. But he didn't play, and they lost. 17 from Jabari Walker to go with 11 boards. Chris Murray had 12 in this game. Chris Murray had a play off the dribble that I've never seen him do before. And pump fake, drive, help comes, leans in, finishes on the right-hand side. Like, every time he plays, he does one little thing that I'm like, I didn't know he did that. He's starting to show more and more consistent flashes of a well-rounded game. He hasn't put it all together with consistency, but he made both his threes tonight. And like he had that play off the dribble, and he continues to make at least one just smart physical defensive play each night. Tonight it was a nice block inside. Like he's I'm not sure that he's much more than a role player in his best form, but he might be a really useful role player because he has a lot of skills. On the other side, the big three of the core four were really good for the Pistons. Jalen Duren 27 and 22, Jaden Ivey had 26, Cade Cunningham had 23, 14 for Stanley Umude, and 11 dimes for Marcus Sasser off the bench. Okay, we don't need to talk about this game too much. I want to say this. If you're a long-time listener to the program, you know that I think coaching is probably 25% or a third. I think I'm settled on a third. It's about a third of the equation, right? Like most of what goes into winning and losing is talent. And I think you saw that, right? When the Blazers who were already missing a bunch of their good players, just didn't have enough talent, the game just started slipping away from them, right? And talent, it's what's Chauncey going to do? Where's he going to look? Sure. I think for the most part in that fourth quarter when things were crumbling, there's not a lot you can do. But when you get to the final play, that's where a coach can put his imprint on it. And the final play of regulation was an absolute mess. Absolute mess. It was no creativity, too obvious. Jeremy Grant's not a good enough ball handler to handle the double teams. It was just a mess. So that's my 66-33 split right there, 67-33 split right there. It's I think most of this game is lost because the Blazers were low on talent, but then it's the coach had a chance to just do something put his actual imprint on the game, make up for that 33%. And he was that was just nightmare final play. The other move today the Blazers made was they signed Ashton Hagans to a 10-day contract. Hagans has been a standout for the Blazers Rip City Remix G League affiliate, and he got this is his second time playing or third game, but second stint with it. He played a couple games with the Minnesota Timberwolves back in 2021, and he's made his NBA debut or his Blazers debut, but his third NBA appearance. I have limited exposure to Ashton Hagans, but I watched him play one game in college, and he ate Carolina's lunch. He just dominated poor Caleb Love and RJ Davis. Just an absolute defensive clinic in that game. I did not care for him because he beat up on my beloved Tar Heels. And then I just saw the remix play a couple weeks ago, a month ago, and he was one of the best players on the floor. My impressions of him is that he's someone he plays really hard on defense, really competitive defensive player who cannot shoot, and he's a hard downhill driver but not a great finisher. And I will say, watching this game, yeah, nothing changed. I don't think I think he's pretty far away from an NBA player, which, it's not his fault. But Ryan Rupert got a DNP-CD. That's a did not play coach's decision. What would he need to do to play? How much worse can he be? I don't think it's that big of a deal that he didn't play, but it is curious to me that it's Rupert just when the game is just completely, that you're light on players anyways, you're playing Justin Minaya and Ibu Baji, and I understand Minaya gets to play because he plays hard on defense and doesn't make mistakes, but he's not good on offense at all. Let's see some Rupert. We're in the second half of the season. It's okay. It's okay. I think this is a thing that's going to be a big deal a small deal for me. Is are the Blazers going to lean into it and allow some developmental minutes? Are they going to chase games? If they chase games, it's not like a crime, but it doesn't seem that productive for where they're at. But also they kept all their vets, right? So they're going to chase games. And I think that balance will be something that I watch for the remainder of the year. It's what are those decisions and what do they look like? Because It wasn't like you're going to take Jeremy Grant out, but there were some other young guys that maybe aren't part of the long-term future. Mania and Higgins and Rupert is, and it's like, why not let him fail? If you're going to lose a 23-point lead to the Pistons, why not let him? Why can't he be the guy that does bad? He could do poorly. I imagine he could go in there and like Ashton Higgins was minus 28 in 27 minutes in a game the Blazers lost by 6. I feel like Ryan Rupert could probably do that. I feel like he probably could. I don't know. It's something to keep an eye on for the remainder of the season. How about we do 5 more of these next week? This is Friday, February 9th show. We do one every day of the week, wherever you get podcasts. The audio feed comes out late at night every morning, 8 a.m. Waiting in your feed. You'll find the YouTube video. Tell your friends about the podcast. They can find it wherever they get podcasts. Also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.